One common question about getting into the lore of a FromSoft game is where people should start. My answer to that has always just been to follow what interests you and go from there. For example, if someone was interested in Rani or her ending, I'd suggest going through all her dialogue, then examining each item description related to her and keeping note of any specific characters, terms, or keywords that stand out to you. This is a little easier said than done though, and it's perfectly fine to get sidetracked by something else that piques your interests, and you don't need to feel obligated to find what you're originally looking for. To give more practical advice, I think one common misstep people make in lore hunting is feeling obligated to play through multiple New Game Plus cycles to collect every item or hear every line of dialogue in the game. This can be very tedious and time-consuming, especially with some drops being dependent on RNG. Instead, most lore hunting can be done without the game even being turned on. Resources like text dumps, videos, guides, and wikis can provide most information one would ever need and dramatically reduce the time it would take to find in-game. Although I did just recommend wikis, there's a pretty big caveat to that. Since wikis are typically community-created resources, there are times where their information can be outright misleading or incorrect, especially in their notes sections. So if you do use a wiki for lore, I highly suggest only looking at text or images pulled directly from the game. Even then, there can still be mistakes, especially if the referenced information comes from a different patch or version of the game. If you do want to play through the game and experience everything yourself though, I'd suggest making multiple save files for different states of the game. This makes it easier to hear certain lines of dialogue, double-check item locations, replay quests, and gather footage if you're interested in that as well. I'd also recommend labeling your different save states with enough detail to know where you were if you forget later on. For instance, my save states often say if it's before or after interacting with bosses and NPCs, so if I have a save state titled Selin, after Lusat, Azur, I know that I'd already recovered both of Lusat and Azur's bodies, and I need to load an earlier save state if I wanted to see where they were. Of course, this is better suited for players on PC, and options are more limited on console. If you do have a limited number of save states to work with, then I'd suggest having a save before any major quests or world changes, preferably with access to as many areas as possible. So now that we've established a library of resources to work with, the question becomes, how do we actually sift through that information? If I'm looking into a new topic, I'll often start with a keyword search and read each relevant entry that comes up. From there, I'll look up other related terms until I feel like I have a better understanding of the topic at hand. As I go through these materials, the biggest things I look out for are hearsay and inconsistencies in the text. The reason for this is since item descriptions are typically written in a limited omniscient third-person perspective, they should be factually accurate and not contradict each other, so when inconsistencies do occur, it tends to come from taking things at face value or not evaluating them critically. One example of this is how the astrologer set in Elden Ring states astrologers read fate in the stars and are said to be the heirs of the glintstone sorcerers, but the preceptor set says glintstone sorcerers are the descendants of astrologers, a fact that Carians remain aware of. The astrologer set isn't lying or wrong, but one of the finer and more frustrating points about FromSoft games is that each character and faction has an agenda, so certain bits of information can be misleading without the appropriate context. The glintstone sorcerers consider themselves superior to the Carians, so in their minds it's natural that their style of sorcery is the truest form of sorcery, and the Carians and astrologer sorceries must be no more than pale imitations of glintstone sorcery. To add on to that, characters like Patches, Fia, and Dee willfully deceive the player at times, and is a common trope among FromSoft games for characters who take on the role of a mentor, like Selin, to meet their end due to a fundamental misunderstanding of their universe. While it's true that NPCs may provide insightful commentary, they're each a product of their environment, and it's generally better to treat character dialogue as secondhand sources of information that's less reliable than item descriptions. In other words, treat each character as though they were patches, and only trust them as far as you can throw them. The reason I hold item descriptions in such high esteem is because if you discount one item's description, it leads to a slippery slope where you can ignore any item's description, and you kind of end up shooting yourself in the foot talking about the lore when you can't agree on the most basic facts of the game. The only time I do disregard item descriptions is when it's clear story elements make concessions for gameplay mechanics. Why do enemies respawn? Or if there's an inconsistency between the game's English and Japanese text. But that's a whole other can of worms we can save for another time. Beyond item descriptions and dialogue, other aspects of the lore can be found in environmental, character, and even the mechanical design of the game. Things like the symbolism in clothing and architecture, and enemy movesets and weaknesses. Analyzing these tends to take more comprehensive knowledge of the game, or require third-party tools like camera mods though, so it's not something I'd recommend for those just starting out. One danger in trying to analyze the visual aspects of their games is that FromSoft is notorious for using a limited number of assets, with some coming from third-party developers, so it's a lot more difficult trying to discern if the visual design of something is meant to be significant, or if the developers were just saving on production costs. For example, relief sculptures in Leyndell can be found in Dark Souls 3 and Bloodborne, and some designs found in Elfile also appear in Path of Exile. Sometimes it can be easy to not see the forest for the trees, and it can be helpful to have outside perspectives to help guide and shape your own. For that, I'd recommend discussion forums like Discord servers or subreddits where you can get direct feedback to any questions you may have, or exposure to new ideas in general. Lore videos can also be helpful in that regard, but there's also the risk of others coming across as being more authoritative than they really are, so treat everything anyone else says with skepticism, myself included. It's a bit of a catch-22. You need to already understand the lore in order to differentiate good lore theories from bad lore theories, and it's not uncommon to rethink a position you previously held and change your opinion. I know the advice so far has been pretty basic, but I'm considering expanding this video into a series of small topics of how to analyze the lore, so if this video has been helpful, or if you're interested in any of the topics on the screen, let me know by liking or leaving a comment below. I'll also include a short list of resources I like to use for Elden Ring, as well as a link to my Discord server in the video description. Thanks for watching, and a special thank you to Dan Creary for providing art for this video's thumbnail. He produces some really cool content like the Saint Hayata image used in my last thumbnail on his website at danielcrearyart.com, and he's currently open for commissions and has been really easy to work with. So if you are in the market for some sweet custom art, check him out. I'd like to thank all my patrons and channel members for their support and helping keep this channel alive. I appreciate it. Fear the old lore.